A lot of people are losing jobs because a lot of people are having negative experiences with AI.
That's Craig Anderton, author, musician, and lecturer. In part one of our conversation, he explains why AI is creating real concern across the music industry and why the pushback from musicians and listeners is something that the industry just can't ignore.
If you're trying to outcomputer a computer, the computer will always win. But the computer can't outhuman a human, and you need to take advantage of that.
He explains why trying to beat AI at precision is the wrong fight, and that the real advantage musicians have is the human element the AI can't replicate.
The main point, I think, to me, is if a computer can make better music than you're not trying hard enough. We can put a fingerprint in the music. AI can't do that.
Today, he outlines exactly how musicians can stay relevant in an AI-driven world by leaning into their creativity and individuality. By the end of this conversation, you'll understand how to use AI as a tool without losing what makes your music uniquely human. Stick around. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is the Inner Circle Podcast. Let's go right to AI, because I know that may not be a favorite subject of yours, but it's one that you're deeply involved in. And it seems like it's mostly you're trying to break some myths, some assumptions about it. So let's start there.
Well, the first myth is that it's going to obsolete all the musicians, which I just don't think is the case.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about the deep end, boy, it's hard to even know where to begin. I mean, we can start with any one of a number of things. I mean, one thing that I've found is that the attitude of consumers and musicians and engineers are very different about AI. Like a lot of engineers or a lot of musicians are like, well, I can take my old demos and I can like add tracks to them and make them real again, and that's fine, or I use it for songwriting or whatever. Engineers are, of course, somewhat scared of it, but it's a convenient way to do things. But consumers really, there's a lot of pushback against AI. I mean, just ask Microsoft, just ask all the people who have been looking for a job and gotten 240 AI-generated responses to the AI-generated resumes and things like that. A lot of people are losing jobs because of it. A lot of people are having negative experiences with AI. AI is not flawless. It hallucinates. It does all these different things. It's being forced on them, and in all these apps, and they just don't want it. So it's already a real reluctance to embrace AI on the part of consumers, and that extends to music. If you look at, there was a very interesting survey that was done by Ipsos, commissioned from Ipsos by Deezer, the French streaming company, and the attitudes of the people listening to music against AI were, frankly, very surprising to me. Many of them, I think it was like something like 44% wanted to be able to like exclude AI-generated music from their playlists, just period, just no, not interested. Most people wanted it flagged. A lot of people felt that it was going to like damage the quality of music overall, that it wasn't a good thing. Listeners, we've kind of lost that in this country a bit, but listeners have emotional attachments to their artists. I mean, we saw that with Taylor Swift, and we've seen that with some other people where they've had those large emotional responses. But a lot of the artists that I see in the United States these days do not have the same kind of following as someone like, the Stray Kids from Korea or whatever. There's just not that emotional bond with the fans. And so they want to support us. They want to support musicians. They would feel better if they knew that the money from their subscription was going to the people they listen to. Like, for example, when I bought a CD, I knew that, X percentage went to the artist who made the CD. It didn't go to somebody else, which is the case with Spotify. So I think one of the problems that musicians have is, well, there's several problems that musicians have. One is they're not leveraging these allies that we have to support independent musician and musician making. And it's not a lost cause. It's not like we have to convince them of anything. They're already convinced. We just have to show them what's going on. The other thing is that musicians, I talk to a lot of musicians, and they're freaked out, and they said, well, yeah, but that same survey that you're quoting, 97% of the people, well, actually it wasn't this survey, it was a different one I quoted, but 97% of the people couldn't tell the difference between AI-generated tracks and human-generated tracks. And I said, well, why are you surprised? You've held up the computer as a role model for the past several decades.
There you go, right.
You're trying to sound like a computer. You cannot outcomputer a computer. If you're trying to outcomputer a computer, the computer will always win, but the computer can't outhuman a human, and you need to take advantage of that.
And there was a great quote about this, about the the perfection or the potential possibility of AI being right. And we know it's not now, but being right all the time. And the equivalent was, well, what if you went to a basketball game and no one ever missed a shot? It would be pretty boring. We as humans kind of like it when there's imperfections, and we're not seeing that with AI.
I'm going to disagree with that because I wouldn't call them imperfections. I've done a lot of study of, quote, pitch correction, unquote, which I consider to be tuning correction. And tuning is not the same as pitch. Tuning means it conforms to a particular scale, and usually 12-tone Western scale, which is based on an irrational number anyway, so it's never going to be in tune. But pitch is fluid. String players move pitch around, vocalists move pitch around. And so like you might go, like, for example, one of the things I saw constantly, Madonna is actually a very good example of this, is when she was going up from in a vocal run, the first note would be tuned correctly, the last note would be tuned correctly, but in between, as she was going up, there would be slight increases in pitch. It would get slightly sharp each time, and it sort of added friction as she was going up for that perfect note, and then it would resolve. It's all about tension and release. That sharpness added tension. And when she went down, a lot of times it would hit a little bit flat. And I noticed, I started looking at my own singing, and I realized I do the same thing. A lot of singers do the same thing. We do it reflexively. We do it unconsciously because we're filtering the singing through our emotions. And our emotions are saying there's friction getting to that note, or there's relaxation getting back down to that note. And AI can't do that. Now, you could train AI to do that. You could say, well, if it does this, if it hits a note in this certain way, you should try this certain thing because that's how most humans do it. But that's not the way all humans do it. Another good example of an imperfection, I was analyzing Steve Gadd's drumming once. I was doing some loops and checking out timings, and I noticed that he consistently, I don't know how he did this, but he consistently would hit the hi-hat about 3 milliseconds ahead of the beat to push it. Now, that's not perfect timing, but it's perfect timing. When I first had a Commodore 64, I was working with a piano player, and he recorded into it, and he looked at his timing. He goes, wow, my timing is really bad. And I said, no, the computer's timing is really bad. Your timing is perfect. So that's why I don't think that they're imperfections. But I do think that we've been so used to hearing this embedded in the music, in human-made music, that that's what we think of as real music.
Someone sent me a list of all of the AI songs that had charted. And there were 10 or 11 of them. And I decided I'm going to listen to all of these in a row.
So I don't have to.
Yeah, right. Well, the interesting thing is they all sounded really great. I mean, if you just, didn't analyze them at all, you just listened. It was like, oh, this is really good. And one of the things I started to notice is, especially with female vocals, they all sounded the same after a while. You listen to 5 or 6 AI female vocals, it's like, I can't tell the difference. So obviously this is something that doesn't fly with anybody when it's all said and done, hence the pushback.
Someone asked me, I said, can you explain the difference between generative AI music and human-based music in as few words as possible? And I thought about it and I said, okay, well, I said, some people have sex, some people make love. Superficially, they seem the same, but they start for different reasons. The process is different and the conclusion is different. And I said that if you really want to beat AI, you need to make love to music. That's what you need to do with your music. And you need to not ask, how do I? You need to ask what if, because AI can't ask what if. I mean, it can to some degree, but it can't come up with like really off the wall things. Like, what if I put this out? What if I put this thing out of phase, which everybody tells me I shouldn't do? Things like that. If you say, how do I, you can only do things that have happened before, and AI is great at that. But if you say, what if, AI doesn't know what to do yet. And it will eventually it'll be able to say, oh, I think I'll take something completely unrelated here. But another thing, if you listen to the, typical AI songs and you listen to the lyrics, they don't have any of the complexity or playfulness with words that someone like, say, a Paul Simon would have, or, any great songwriter. They play with the words. They don't just put them out there. So that's another big difference, I think, in terms of humanness.
Hey, quick pause. Have you ever felt like your mixes are close, but just not quite to the level that you hear from the pros? The truth is, even with today's powerful home studios, it's the techniques that make all the difference. Mixing Engineer's Handbook, now in its 6th edition, walks you through these techniques step by step, from EQ and compression to immersive audio and the latest plugins. You'll also hear directly from some of the world's top mixers through exclusive interviews and bonus content. If you want your mixes to sound polished and professional no matter what setup you're working on, scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. The one I just heard, I spoke with Ed C., famous engineer in Nashville, and he was saying that some of his songwriter friends who had hits from way back and finally got their catalog back, they would listen to the songs and they go, yeah, but I really wish it was more contemporary. And of course, they throw it into AI of your choice, and they come up with something that a more modern version of what they had. The other thing is doing songwriter demos. Now, obviously, this is bad for musicians, but now you can take that piano vocal or guitar vocal and say, make me a demo around it, and there you go. It's really fast. Change the vocal from my vocal to Taylor Swift so it sounds like her. Well, whatever the case. So there are instances where it can be useful. Don't you agree?
I can think of thousands of ways that AI could be helpful to me in the studio, and machine learning too. A lot of people don't know the difference that much, but I mean, one of my favorite examples is with machine learning and AI. Let's suppose I'm comping a vocal. Okay, I like to do first take vocals as much as possible, but that doesn't mean I won't do like 10 or 12 comps in that first take. And pick things. Now, if AI looked at me enough and what I chose for my comps, it would get a pretty good idea of what I choose. It would look for comps that didn't have mouth noises or background sounds, or that didn't have pitch problems, or that had vibrato at the end of the line, because I like to do that. And after a while, maybe after a month or so, it could go through the comps and pick out 2 or 3 and say, these are most closely matched to the type of comps that you pick. Another thing where I could see AI being really useful is I've done a lot of soundtracks for videos. And a lot of these are designed to be disposable and not interfere with anything or be interesting in any way, shape, or form, And AI is great for that too. The demo thing, I'm fortunate I was trained on several instruments, so I can play keyboards and guitar and things like that, and I can produce a pretty complete demo myself. But not every, someone might be a fantastic singer and guitar player, or singer and piano player, and want to flesh out an arrangement to convey what that song is about. And they can't go out and hire an orchestra. They can't, they might use samplers. I mean, people would make the same argument about samplers, they replace musicians. And yet, look how many job opportunities samplers have brought to people as well. I was in Local 802 at the time when samplers were coming and people were grousing about it. I said, who do you think plays these things? Accountants? I mean, it's like musicians. These are all tools for musicians. And another thing is, I'm all in favor of people being able to play with music, if they find it too difficult or time consuming, or they just don't have the interest in spending the time to learn an instrument. If they can play with music, if they can take something and remix it, if they can do something for their friends and express themselves, I think that's fantastic. I think the more people who do that, the better for all of us, because they'll appreciate music. It's like I was playing a lot over in Germany at the turn of the century, like doing DJs and electronic stuff and all that. And so many of those people who started off as DJs ended up learning instruments. Why are you playing bass now? Yeah, well, I couldn't find any good bass loops, so
Yeah.
So, I could really see this as, another analogy I use is like, there's nothing wrong with playing with the company softball team. You don't have to be an outfielder for the Yankees, You can have a lot of fun playing softball. So I think these tools are fine. There's really multiple facets. One is, okay, there's that aspect. There's what you're talking about, like how does it serve musicians? And there's the legal aspect, which is a whole other, can of worms. The second column I wrote about AI for Mix online was, does AI stand for attorneys incoming? And we're going to be seeing more and more and more of that, especially, there was a very interesting study from Cornell that I saw just before I did my presentation at NAMM about AI, where they bombarded, I forget, I think it was either Claude or ChatGPT with like a zillion prompts to see if it could reproduce Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And it did, but the problem was that it was copied. I think, I forget the percentage, but it may have been like 85 or 86% was verbatim. So what that indicates is that it's not learning, it's copying, it's storing the work, it's plagiarizing. That is very different from what the Copyright Office has been told by companies that make these AI things. Oh no, nothing like that stored, it's all learned. No, it's not all learned, apparently. So we've got some minefields ahead in this world.
Let's talk about, you wrote an article, and I know it was part of your recent presentations about influences versus imitation when it comes to AI. Can you speak to that?
The standard cop-out for the AI is wonderful and buy it so I can make money people is that, well, musicians just, are influenced by everything too. I mean, you've grown up listening to music and you listen to Coltrane and you play a certain way. You listen to Eric Clapton, you play a certain way. You listen to techno, you play a certain way. But I think there's a huge difference between imitation and influence, because influences are, again, like pitch, it's filtered through our emotions, and we choose what portions we want to accept or reject or subvert or modify or blend with something else. Think of it as cooking. The influences are like raw ingredients, but those raw ingredients can make beef stroganoff, or they can make lemon sauce flounder, or whatever. They're just ingredients. One of my favorite examples of that is Jack Bruce, who was the bass player in Cream and several other rock groups, was heavily influenced by Bach. He was a huge Bach fan. And if you listen really carefully to his bass lines, you'll hear that some of his harmonic stuff is very much influenced by sort of a Bach contrapuntal kind of vibe. But if you told AI, make me a Jack Bruce bass part, would it know to incorporate influences from Bach, or would it just assume that the only influences that Jack Bruce evidenced were the influences he would always use forever on? Or Jack Johnson, the Miles Davis album, which I think is one of Miles Davis's best. It was about a fighter, it was about a prize fighter. But Jack Johnson trained in an East St. Louis gym. He hung out with fighters. He knew what fighting was about. He knew what that world was. I can't help but think that that influenced his music as much as any musical influence would have. Does ChatGPT go to East St. Louis and hang out in a gym?
You're talking about Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you said Jack Johnson. And
so, no, well, that was the album. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the
Jack
album.
Johnson
Okay,
album,
yeah, just to
Jack Johnson
clarify.
was the fighter.
Yes,
and
right.
It was the name of the album for the film that Miles Davis did the soundtrack to, which I think everybody should go out and buy immediately if they can.
How much do you use AI in the studio? Do you use it at all?
Not for music. I use it a lot for research. I just wrote a book about microphones, and I wrote one on the ultimate guide to vocal production. And I wanted to include a section on preamps and how they influence the sound. So I like to include as many examples of things as possible. So I can go into ChatGPT or whatever and say, give me a list of all the mic preamps out there that are marketed specifically as mic preamps, and give me a 1-second summary of what they claim is the major difference. And then like a few seconds later, I've got a list of like 23 mic preamps. And then I can go and I can do the research myself. If one says it's designed to give character, it's like, okay, this might be a good one to show what produces character in something. And I'll go to it and I'll say, yeah, they use a vacuum tube, they use transformers at the inputs and the outputs. Okay, I see what they're doing, I get it. I'll see other ones that are claimed to be transparent. What are they doing there? Or another one that claims to accommodate different microphones. Oh, they have variable impedance. Okay, that's something else I need to cover. So I find it very useful for digging deep into stuff that would normally take me much longer. And the other thing is, well, of course, this is a problem with AI too, is I can't find out about things I don't know to search for. If company XYZ that I've never heard of makes a mic preamp that I've never heard of, I'm not going to know to look for it. So that's another thing where AI is really helpful. In terms of writing, I got to say it's useless. I mean, it really is, because what I'm doing is not like a manual where you can feed in, steps and it will coordinate it and put the text together. It's not like summarizing something that already exists. When I'm trying to explain how to do vintage flanging in Cubase, I mean, it's not, our sessions were booked after Hendrix when he was doing Electric Ladyland, and the flanging setup was always set up because they didn't want to tear it down because it was just such a hassle. So we used the flanging setup that Hendrix used, and that sound was burned into my brain, and I understood what made it different. The inertia of the motor, the electronic stuff doesn't really do that. The fact that it could go ahead of or behind the rhythm, things like that. And so like those all got incorporated into the article about how to do vintage flanging with Cubase. I just don't see that AI would come up with that until that article is out there and it can steal it. I mean, be influenced by it.
But the other thing I tell it sometimes is if you can clarify something, then please do. And it does a great job sometimes. And sometimes it's not better than what I could do.
I hate to say this, but a lot of the, I do updates on my books, right?
Yeah.
The free updates. So I'm constantly honing the language and making the layout more mobile friendly. But one of the things I've noticed is that the literacy has gone down so much that one of my goals in editing is to have sentences that are less than 14 words and put as many things into bullet points and steps as possible, and even use a different colored typeface for the things that are step-by-step instructions. So I don't know. I mean, probably AI could help with that. But, and also my late wife was a fantastic proofreader, and she was a human. And she also could ask questions, like, did you really mean to say this? Yeah, it's kind of spelled that way. The company likes an intercap Z in the middle of its product name or whatever. And she was flawless, and she was a human. So it's kind of hard to argue with that, but those people are rare, But yeah, if I could find something that in a few seconds would flag every spelling error and have it be a legitimate spelling error and not recognize, trade names and particular spellings of companies, that would be great. But as far as the clarity is concerned, I've tried that a couple times actually, and probably not enough to be able to make an informed opinion. But there have been a few cases where I've had something, I thought, oh, that's a little convoluted, and I'll ask AI to fix it. And it doesn't really fix it. And a lot of times it's not good at nuance, it's just not good at nuance. And so.
Interesting, in the studio, I see far more uses, but we're talking mostly machine learning rather than something that's akin to an LLM, large language model. And much of what I see is more like, okay, you want your guitar to sound really great. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it for you. And then what it will do is it will compare to what it thinks a really good guitar is. But that doesn't mean it's going to fit in your particular track because each one is unique. So I draw the line there. It's like, okay, if you're a beginner and you don't know any better, yeah, sure, have at it. But other than that, I don't think so.
But again, it can only give you what's happened before. Now, one place where I would see AI as being incredibly useful is for voiceovers and narration. So let's suppose you're doing the narration for a King Canine dog food or whatever, and they change the name to Emperor Canine dog food. And you could have, in fact, I think it was Adobe that came up with a program it was never released commercially, but it was called like Voco or something like that. And it would actually go and find the phonemes necessary to make the word emperor and replace king with emperor in every instance. It'd be great if some of the things that I did, I could replace version 1.0 with version 2.1, things like that. AI would be fantastic for that.
I had someone that listens to my podcast all the time, fed it into 11, I think. And he sent me back a file, nothing which I ever spoke. And he said, okay, I had the AI train on your voice. And it sounded just like me, almost. Again, nuances. There were things that I noticed, like, well, that's not me. But boy, it's close enough that it would fool some people.
Well, it's a lot of the YouTube videos are using, synthesized voice. And frankly, doing narration is very time consuming for me, it really is. And to make all the little fixes and get rid of the mouth clicks and all that jazz. I mean, it would be great if I've tried to see if I could do synthesized stuff, especially when I had a cold. It's like, oh God, my voice sounds terrible, And then I tried to pick a voice. I tried to make it just like, no, I just can't do this. People just have to go, oh, he has a cold, But yeah, I'm not against what AI can do. I mean, obviously in medicine, it's fantastic in terms of running scenarios. I mean, there's so many fantastic applications. And I can really see, like in teaching music, for example, and coming up with a graduated course, being able to take answers from a student and see what confuses them and what makes sense to them and what they're ready for next. I mean, there's all kinds of applications. What concerns me is that, like any invention, the invention isn't the problem, it's the people using it. And how are they going to use it? And what are they going to use it for? And this comment that the president of Suno said about how, just he doesn't think most musicians have fun making music these days. It's like, well, okay, maybe projection much. But, when people were telling me about, there was a new version of Logic that came out with like a session bass player and session whatever. And if you don't play bass, that's great. I mean, that's fantastic. But I play bass. I don't want that taken away. I like playing bass parts. I like coming up with new things. I mean, that's my enjoyment of playing music. I don't want to come up with things. Now, there are things that I do that are more algorithmic. For example, in Studio One, there's a feature called harmonic editing. And it's like the chord track in Cubase, or you've seen maybe some other programs. It's a chord track, but it works with audio. So I can play a chord progression on rhythm guitar, and it'll parse that, and it will give me basically a chord chart. And then I can take individual sections, go, oh, maybe I want a relative minor here instead. And that's a very cool thing to be able to do. Or there was one time when I just really wanted to come up with like a really out there bass part, like I would not come up with. It was for a section that was sort of chaotic in the middle of a song. So I just played in the rhythm that I wanted and hit all kinds of different notes, but in the exact rhythm that I wanted. And then I had it follow the chord track. So it actually followed the music. So it was chaotic, but it was proper. So I mean, there are things like that. The main point I think that about this whole AI music thing is, if a computer can make better music than you're not trying hard enough. And there's a line in one of my songs, accelerating every word she said. Now, would AI associate acceleration with someone speaking to me? Would AI make those kind of changes? The other thing is that I'm telling anybody who will listen to me, look at what K-pop is doing these days. I don't know if have you seen the Stray Kids movie, the
No.
Dominator? Oh God,
No, I haven't.
It's not everybody's cup of tea. Believe me, it's a bunch of 30-year-olds, I guess by now. 8 of them synchronized, incredible dancing, singing, all that jazz, with a real band behind them, though. But the thing about it is that there are also some interviews with the various members, and you're also seeing how they relate to the fans. And as far as they're concerned, they're nothing. The fans are the stars. All they want to do is produce something that makes their fans go, wow, that's incredible. And they are always pushing harder. They're always trying to do more things. If you look at the difference between concert footage from like a year ago to the most recent concert, you can see it's like they've learned so much. They've gotten so much better. They are constantly pushing themselves. They're constantly trying new things. They will try 45 different things in the same song, and I mean, it'll go from like a techno thing and a rap thing, and they're wildly inventive. For a lot of people in say the older demographic, it doesnst make sense. It's like, oh, I don't know, it's kind of loud and it all sounds the same. Yeah, well, that's what they said about rock and roll too. But what I'm seeing is that there's this culture that loves music. The fans love physical product. They will buy CDs. They will buy videos because they want to own it. They want to collect it. They're fans, and they're placed on a pedestal. I think we could use a lot more of that in the music industry here right now, instead of people being afraid about AI. That's why I said, we have fingerprints. We can put a fingerprint in the music. AI can't do that. You can't listen to an AI song and go that's a Bob Clearmountain mix or something like that. You just can't. There's no fingerprint. We can put fingerprints in the music, and that's how you beat AI, by challenging yourself,
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news, and find out about openings for my latest online classes at bobbyowsinski.com. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time